joining me. I am I am so excited to speak to you about Pam Tanowitz and her piece Gustave Le Gray. But first, I wanted to congratulate you on your Broadway debut of Dancin', Fosse Revival, which has had great reviews, and I can't wait to see.
We need you to come see it, Lauren. So who knows how long it'll be there, but you gotta come quick, everyone.
Years and years. It's going to be, I have a feeling.
I don't know how Broadway works, but that seems unlikely.
So I think San Francisco audiences will obviously be very familiar with your and Harriet's work. You have designed many ballets out here for choreographers like Justin Peck and Christopher Wheeldon and others. But I don't think they will be quite as familiar with Pam's work. And so I was hoping to get a little bit of insight into Gustave Le Gray and the iconic costumes that you designed and kind of your relationship with Pam.
Okay. Pam Tanowitz. Pam Tanowitz is just so like firmly situated in the history of American modern dance and ballet because of her own kind of experience and curiosity in like the various forms that make up the fabric of that history. And I first learned about Pam when I was dancing for Lar Lubavitch, which was like 2009. And Lar would frequently say to me, have you seen the work of Pam Tanowitz? I think you'd be really interested in it. I think she's really something. And I was like, I don't know who you're talking about. I've never seen this. I'll look out for it. And at the time, Pam was known in like the kind of New York community of intellectual modern dance. And she'd been plugging away at it for many, many years, but I just didn't know her work, and it wasn't being presented frequently at big venues. But she was always like putting together groups of dancers, and she was being presented by Works in Process at the Guggenheim, and she was being presented at Movement Research and some of the more like esoteric, smaller presenting venues in New York. And so in, let's see, 2000, and I'm really gonna not know this. In like 2013 or 14, Pam approached me via the recommendation of, I think, a Cunningham dancer named Rashawn Mitchell, who she had worked with as a dancer in the past, who was like, you know, maybe think about using Reid to design something. And so without having really seen Pam's work at that point, I think I'd seen one piece at an APAP performance. Pam asked me to design 2 pieces that were going to be presented at the Joyce. And so the process of getting to know her through those 2 dances and working on them with her, the process really endeared me to Pam Tanowitz because we had a kind of like mutual affinity for the same kind of dances. Our value system in the context of New York modern dance and ballet felt really aligned. And even so, at the time, like I didn't feel I had like an incredibly emotional connection to her work, but I really enjoyed the process of working with her, and it felt fun and also conceptual, and it didn't feel labored or overwrought emotionally. Pam seemed to have kind of like lighthearted attitude about her process, and a really, she was just sort of open to feedback and ideas and humor. And so there was these two pieces, and one of them was called Heaven on One's Head. And she was like, I'm really like interested in the curtain at the Joyce Theater. And I was like, okay. And, you know, the curtain at the Joyce Theater is red velvet, but what's distinguishing about it is that it is ruched. So it's like one of those old timey curtains where it has all these strings to it that pull it up and it gathers into these swags. And she was like, really am into the ruching. And I was like, okay. She was like, and there's going to be parts of this piece where like the curtain's going to come down most of the way. So you'll just see like feet behind it, but one dancer is going to come out and like dance in front of it. And she was like, I think the costume should look like the curtain. I was like, okay. So I made a set of costumes that looked like the Joyce curtain, or they referenced it. And that was kind of the beginning of just like what would become one of the many ways in which we approach designing for Pam, which would be to always consider the space where the dance was going to be. Because Pam is always interested in the context of who she's making the dance for and where the dance is happening, and what is the context of that space and that time and those people. So all those factors weigh really heavily into the dances she's making, which is, it's really interesting when you're considering like a dance of Pam's that then lives beyond its initial presentation, because then something is missing. So Harriet, Harriet, my design partner, started working with me more full time after I'd already done those first few pieces for Pam Tanowitz. And so Harriet sort of got in on the process with Pam, I think, when we did a piece for another Joyce presentation a year, 2 years later, called the work, something progresses as if in a dream of glittering surfaces. It's this incredibly long title. And after that, everything that we've designed for Pam has been both Harriet and I. It's been many, many pieces. We've done like 25, 26 dances for Pam at this point, sort of in the context of her own company, and now in the context of the work she's been making for ballet companies and the Paul Taylor American Modern Dance Theater and others. So Gustave Le Gray came about several years ago as a co-commission between Miami City Ballet and Dance Theater of Harlem, who were putting on this like show produced by the Kennedy Center. And they were doing their own repertoire. Miami City Ballet was doing something and Dance Theater of Harlem was doing something. And then the piece that would kind of unite the two companies was an original commission by Pam Tanowitz called Gustave Le Gray, to a score by Carolyn Shaw. And it was at the Opera House at the Kennedy Center, which became like the most interesting contextual fact about the process. So Pam was like, it's in the Opera House. How can we not take that into consideration? So Davis and Scandrett, who did the lighting, and then Harriet and I really played on the visual themes of that space, which is that it's like red everywhere. There's these kind of huge expanses of red that move sort of up and over and up into these glittering chandeliers. And initially, I thought we might find a way of like bringing in the sparkle of these big chandeliers, but at the time, Harriet and I were really invested in this idea about planes of fabric, strips of fabric with slits in them and like lots of negative space. So we wanted to bring that concept into this piece and really exaggerate it. We'd already kind of explored it in smaller ways. And then Harriet was the one who really kind of pushed this direction of like doing big planes of fabric. And so we experimented with what was possible in terms of like least amount of seams and like least amount of fabric connecting to itself, and more just like fabric being on the body while also revealing the body inside of it. And so through some trial and error and dancer testing, we came up with these costumes that sort of towed the line of being functional but also dangerous simultaneously. And the four dancers we were working with, the two from Miami City Ballet and two from Dance Theater of Harlem, were really instrumental in helping us make those costumes work, because they were determined to keep the designs as close to the idea as possible. So there are various like small ways in which we had to contain the costume at the wrists and ankles and the neck, and it was a fine balance of like, how much do we need to close this costume so the dancers don't get tangled in it, but also without losing the sense of it being just completely open. And now the dance has like gone on to have more of a life, which is really exciting. And it's interesting to like see it in different contexts. And it happened at New York City Ballet a year ago. And I showed up at a performance of it where one of the dancers had COVID or was injured. And so they did it with 3 dancers.
Oh, wow.
So interesting, like Pam again in that moment was so interested in the context of the situation that she was like, this dance can be rearranged for 3 people. There's no reason why we wouldn't then just acknowledge the reality of this situation. There are now 3 people, so this is now a dance for 3.
I feel like it's such a great example of, this ballet is a great example of how it seems to me like Pam and you and Harriet have such a respectful relationship that you can have this big idea that takes a lot of kind of, trial and error. So it feels like the designs are equal to the choreography. And I feel like that kind of shows in the piece itself that it wouldn't be the same piece without the costumes or different costumes. And I think that it feels like that's really evident. And maybe that's why you all have had such a prolific kind of relationship, that there is this like really beautiful mutual respect. And I think that's probably, shows kind of who you are and who Pam is.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true to observe that we, in our work with Pam, are in a space where we feel free to explore ideas that are perhaps not like deeply related to a concept that maybe Pam is exploring in the work. Because really when Pam is making a work, it seems to me that she's taking, she's looking at all the materials in front of her in that moment. And I think that's what makes her the sort of definition of a contemporary art maker, because she's not coming to the table and trying to shape everything to fit into a kind of pre-devised idea. She's coming in with ideas, but she's also working with the materials that are evolving around her. So there's the material of the dancers, there's the material that we're thinking about, there's this music, there's the space that the dance is going to be performed in, there's the rehearsal process, who's going to be there that day, etc. So there's a million factors that sort of like very organically find their way into her work. And what I think is the most interesting thing about Pam's work, and something I was thinking about today, because I was listening to a podcast about musical arrangements and orchestral arrangements for Broadway shows. And I was thinking about Pam's relationship to music and the kind of thrilling way that Pam is very interested in music as a component of the work. She's not tied to a kind of explicit matching of her steps and the music, which is not to say that they exist in a realm of chance like most of Merce Cunningham's work. It's not at all like that. In fact, Pam really shapes her dances with the music without explicitly abiding the rhythms of the music itself. So her dances and the steps that she creates with the performers like have a rhythm. And rhythm is so important in Pam's work. And when the music and her dances exist in the same space, you see this incredible conversation between these like two sets of rhythms that occasionally like sync up and then occasionally do not. And it's sort of like, it makes them very alive, and it kind of aligns them with real life, as opposed to constantly keeping you in the realm of non-reality, which is like a dance that is to the music. Whereas with Pam, suddenly there's this life that comes with this sense of possibility, where the music and the dance are in conversation, as opposed to just like being inextricably linked.
Yeah.
I don't know what the question was, TBH.
I think you answered it, whatever it was.
But yes, Pam, with Pam, we feel very free to try things. And she encourages that. And, you know, there's a measure of like parameters in any situation. And with certain pieces, Pam is, I think, more explicit about what she's imagining it's going to look like. And with other pieces, like Gustave Le Gray, for example, she was really not explicit about the silhouettes of the clothes or how she wanted them to move, etc. So it was really like a space where Harriet and I could play. But, you know, with every piece, there's like a different avenue into it. It's just this one in particular was a real space of experimentation.
Well, I think that, I mean, both you and Harriet and Pam are really kind of at this really exciting place in dance, that your designs and her work are really unique. And I think that's hard to be, you know, in dance. So to see you guys together is just so special. And I'm so excited for the audiences here to get to see it live.
I'm curious. I'm excited for that too. And I think, can I say something else?
Please.
I think that while Pam's work is unique, you know, any new dance is its own thing. It is unique. I think Pam doesn't worry herself with perhaps trying to like invent a new step. Or, you know, Pam is really invested in what came before and what things are and what things exist in people's bodies already. And then the thing that I think is useful to think about while you're watching Pam's work is not necessarily like, this may not be true, but the way that she takes steps that come from her interests in dance history or her interests in the histories of the bodies she's working with, she then takes on the role of like a composer or a collagist, where she takes fragments and she's interested in like how they come together, whether that's in repetition or in a different order or in a different plane. But she really uses what's already there. And the magic of her work is that it is in the kind of fragmentation and collaging of it that it becomes something unique.
Yeah, it's just really well said. I think that you can tell that she has like such a respect for the history of dance in general and American dance maybe specifically. And just, yeah, it takes a lot of care. And I think that you do that as well.
We're trying. Yeah, she's like many really great choreographers. She comes to the table with a history and an understanding of what came before. And in the way that, like, for example, Alexei Ratmansky's work is so effective and affecting. He's coming to dance making with an enormous body of information, both like through his own training and dancing in various realms of ballet, both, you know, Eastern European traditions and Western European traditions and Canada, etc. It is that kind of like eclectic mix and curiosity for form that makes the work great.
Absolutely. Well, I think that we hopefully have piqued the audience members enough that they will rush to the theater to see Gustave Le
Run,
Gray.
walk, run.
But Reid, I'm so grateful for you to take the time today to speak with me, and congrats again.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure, and we can keep talking.
Yes, we can.
Bye, everybody.